This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC Limited, has released its financial statement for the year 2022, declaring the sum of 8.8 trillion naira as revenue. The release of this report comes after pressure from various stakeholders for the NNPC to open its books to public scrutiny. The NNPCL is a member of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, a global body that promotes the open and accountable management of oil, gas and mineral resources. In its 2022 audited financial statement, it was released after a meeting with a team from the initiative last Thursday. Radio Now's Stephen Imediegu spoke with Marcel Okeke, a former chief economist with Zenith Bank. Mr. Okeke begins by giving his reaction to the report.
It's something good, because for a government agency of that status, to have released its financial statement, I will say timely, is something good and quite encouraging, and goes to show that if they sustain that track record, it's likely they're going to do much better even going forward. Because in the past, you hardly hear about any government agency releasing its audited financial statement. So this one is a good outing for NNPC, I must say.
Given how important the NNPC is to the funding of Nigeria, if we can use that expression, is there any concern that it took some pressure from stakeholders to get the NNPC to release its financial statement for the year 2022?
No. On the contrary, the organization was all along trying to meet every statutory requirement. As a matter of fact, the body has been waiting for a properly constituted board of directors, which, of course, to our knowledge, the current president, appointed, not long ago when he retained the current GMD CEO, Mr. Kyari, and appointed someone as a post. So the board got properly constituted, and that is why they have a consolidated financial statement that covers 16 months, part of 2021 and the whole of 2022. Of course, they got converted to limited liability company sometime in 2021, and so that's why they have 16 months, consolidated financial statement. It wasn't any pressure from anybody, as far as I'm concerned. So that is the way it is.
Right. Now, this particular report shows a rise in NNPC's revenue by about 37.32%. It's up from 6.42 trillion in 2021. Is this a source for hope?
I think I will be positive about it to say yes. What they have done or what their figures show gives some kind of hope, because even some credible economic agents have said something to this effect, relevant agents. Professor Matt Naji, who used to be Minister for, Minister of Power, was speaking in faraway Turkey and commended the NNPC, for his showing all the commercial orientation this time around, and that is one. A few days ago, this global body that looks into transparency of extractive companies, that is Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. Their director visited Mele Kyari and observed that they are doing very well. In fact, among all the extractive companies all over the world, that they have now come to be among the best in terms of their reporting and transparency and openness and commercial orientation. So when you put all this together, you shouldn't have any doubt as to what the NNPC will be looking like Okay, so if they sustain it, there is hope that to a large extent, Nigerian economy will benefit from the new NNPC. That's my own position.
Mr. Okoeke, I wonder if you can speak to us about numbers. Now, this report says that NNPC's revenue increased to 8.81 trillion for the period under review. It goes on to state to point out a number of other numbers, including deferred tax liabilities standing at 13.23 trillion naira. Its deferred tax asset has amounted to 3.09 trillion naira under the same period. Now, looking at the numbers from a layman's perspective, it does appear that NNPC has a number of, if you want to call it, debts that haven't been paid just yet. How does this stand side by side with the declaration of 8.8 trillion naira as revenue, 8.81 trillion naira as revenue in 2022?
Well, one thing that is obvious to everybody is that organization called NNPCL is a kind of still undergoing transition. Okay, in other words, to assume its proper shape. Is a creation of the Petroleum Industry Act that was just signed by the SY President Buhari. And the PIA, which is Petroleum Industry Act, took over a decade, to come into existence. And within all those years, the NNPC structure and stature and operational mode, was kind of shrouded in secrecy, so to speak. Okay, yes, but sometime around June, July 2021, after the signing of the Petroleum Industry Bill into an act, it now transformed or started transforming into a public limited liability company. Okay, and that is why when it counted the number of months in 2021 and the rest of 2022 that it existed, it came to 16 years. So in the course of this transition, a lot of things, will not be so clear cut yet. You understand? So until, for example, let me tell you, when it comes to ownership now, yes, even though it's called public limited liability companies, it's essentially still owned by the government, because these shares are held by the Federal Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Petroleum. You understand? But in the public domain, we are still expecting that going forward it continue to transform so that these shares we are talking about are likely to be sold, to the public, the private sector, and some other stakeholders and all that. So whatever the figure you mentioned are, I want to believe that it is part and parcel of their transition, from being their old selves, in quotes, to the new NNPC, which must operate according to, in line with commercial stipulations and Companies and Allied Matters Act completely. That's the way I want to put it. So it's part of the transition.
Mr. Okeke, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That was Marcel Okeke, a former chief economist with Zenith Bank, speaking to Radio Now's Stephen Imediego on the recently published 2022 audited financial statement of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Private commodities exchange Afex Nigeria has released its commodities outlook for 2024. It projects a rise in staple commodities in terms of prices. This projected rise in Nigerian markets is almost opposite to the projected drop in the cost of staples on the global market. Our guest this morning is Afex Nigeria's research analyst Eniola Akindele, joining us to discuss this report in detail. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Akindele.
Good morning. It's nice to be here. Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Your report says global commodities prices will see a general decrease, but here in Nigeria, we're expected to tend in the other direction, which is we'll see an increase. Give us a summary of the factors that will drive this increase here.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. On the global landscape, according to outlook from World Bank and FAO, commodity prices generally are going to experience a decline ranging from energy 5% decline, fertilizer 15%, and food prices to decline by 2%. And this is actually driven by the improved supply level of this commodity in the global market. For energy, there will be improved supply level from non-OPEC members, and then for food prices, there is actually improved level across key commodities in the world, particularly for grains. According to FAO, there is around 2% increase year on year for major grain commodities, and this is like the highest we've seen historically, with the total grain level in the global space around 2.8 billion tons this 2023-2024 harvest season. And now trickling down to Nigeria, we will not likely see the downward trajectory in prices of commodities, and this is actually owing to the supply condition and also macroeconomic condition in the country. For the supply, there is reduced opening stock for most of our commodities, and also the production volume by farmers of these commodities are at one of the lowest levels in history. Also, with the FX devaluation, we see that most export commodities are at high level domestically because of this continuous naira weakening against dollar.
Now, in your report, you point out that because the FX and fuel, essentially the massive economic reforms we saw in the third quarter of last year, because they came essentially at a point where planting and harvest season don't necessarily tie in, that we're likely to see the effects on the agricultural sector soon. What is that effect supposed to look like?
Okay, we are going to see that on, I think the better way to put it is agricultural production output, because we are already seeing the effect on prices, especially export commodities like cocoa, ginger, and even soybean. With the agricultural production, we are likely to see the effect coming into full play in the wet season of this year, particularly, most of our agricultural inputs are import dependent. Even though we produce fertilizer, raw materials used in blending this fertilizer are imported from other countries, and also fuel cost is also going to increase, and which will also drive up retail prices of these commodities. So by this production cost of these commodities is going to increase in this 2024 production cycle, and this will have transmitted effect on the consumer prices for these commodities.
Mr. Akindele, can you quantify Nigeria's exposure to the global market if the variables you identified, such as the crisis in the Middle East, escalate and affect the expected trend?
Okay, I think it will be so difficult to quantify. But one scenario that is coming to my head to quantify that will be the World Bank projection for the escalation of the crisis in the Middle East. According to World Bank, if there is small disruption, we are likely going to see around 13% increase in energy price. If there is a medium disruption, we are likely going to see around 30% increase in energy price. And it's like a large disruption scenario, which is like a worst scenario, we are going to see above 40% increase in energy price. And what this means is that this energy price has transmitted effect on fertilizer price first, logistic cost, and this will reverberate across other commodity prices. And this is actually the only way by which we can quantify, although the intensity of this depends on the length of the escalation. If for a short period, we might only see effects on the energy prices directly, but if for an extended period, then the effect is likely going to go beyond energy prices across all commodities, particularly food commodities.
So I want to bring you back to the agricultural situation. You list factors affecting the planting season in 2023, and it's interesting the difference between insecurity, which is on the lower end, and low access to finances, which you have on the wider end. And I'm just going to very quickly reel out those factors that you mentioned: low access to farmlands, insecurity, delayed rainfall, pest infestation, insufficient rainfall, excess rainfall, low access to inputs, and then low access to finance, which is the greater impediment. It's an interesting figure. Tell us, what exactly did you see? What were the numbers that informed this ranking?
Okay, thank you. I think I will just note 3 things quickly as regards that. Firstly, those numbers are directly from farmers' responses. we didn't add anything. As actually from we surveyed around 50,000 farmers in 2023, and this is directly their responses. And also another thing we should know that is actually proportion. So this means that proportion of farmers that says access to finance is a great challenge to them over insecurity is higher. So and another thing we should know is that insecurity remains one of the biggest challenge to agriculture, and not even agriculture, to everybody in the country. However, we should know that insecurity does not cut across every part of the country. So since our survey cut across every region in the country, access to finance it tends to be more of a challenge because this cut across every region in the country compared to insecurity.
Mr. Akindele, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. Our guest, Eniola Akindele, is the research analyst at Afex Nigeria, speaking to us on the private commodities exchange outlook for 2024, which projected a rise in the price of staple commodities in Nigeria. Now, breakfast continues with Naira and Kobo in just a moment. Do stay with us.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
You're welcome back into the conversation on Tech Now. This morning, we turn to something a bit more centered on the Nigerian space. They say charity begins at home after all. This morning, we are looking at a report from the Nigeria Data Protection Commission, the NDPC, which has said that it is actively investigating 17 major cases of data breaches across various sectors, including finance, technology, education, consulting, government, logistics, as well as gaming and lottery. The National Commissioner of the NDPC, Dr. Vincent Olatunji, made the disclosure at the Global Data Privacy Day on Sunday in Abuja. Now, in June of last year, the NDPC disclosed that Zenith Bank, GT Bank, Fidelity, Leadway Insurance, Babcock University, and some companies were under investigation for alleged data breaches. By October of 2023, the Commission said it was investigating OPay, Meta, and DHL for alleged data breaches as well. Joining us this morning is Ozo Omosigo, the technical lead for 0 and 1. Mr. Omosigo, good morning and thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Yes, good morning.
What do you make of this report from the NDPC regarding data breaches?
Well, the report is good from the sense of, from the perspective of, it shows that they are being active, and the entire concept around data breaches are things that we are paying attention to. So that is a good thing because it's showing that, yes, the commission is more active. However, as part of that report, there seems to be almost a celebration of some sort, to the fact that, for example, 400 million naira has been generated as revenue as part of the process. I think that the commission will do well focusing on things that help to protect individuals and organizations, as opposed to, looking at it from a revenue point of view. So I think that, having the right compass and the right focus is very key to the success of, what the commission is supposed to be doing. So I think that efforts should be concentrated on helping and enabling organizations to better protect themselves, and then obviously subsequently to better report when there are incidences, all still in a bid to help protect individuals,
Well, I mean, perhaps it's worth saying that the bit of the revenue generation may have just been an aside. It's typically how conversations go when government functions do come along. Although I do wonder your thoughts on the sectors that were mentioned, right? So the NDPC chair actually mentions certain businesses that they're investigating, and notably a number of them are banks. A couple of them are some of the major banks in the country. It's not new to hear data breaches from the banking sector. What are your thoughts on how we've been able to approach minimizing the number of incidences?
Right. So in terms of the sectors, and if we're talking specifically about the financial sector and the banks, right? I think one thing to understand is the banks are a juicy target for threat actors across the globe, right? The nature of what banks do and the amount of money available within banks provides, a perfect target for highly skilled threat actors to target. And so it's not going to be, it's not uncommon And it's not surprising to see that, banks top the list, right? In terms of what are we doing to help protect, and this goes back to the initial point I made, our focus really should be trying to see, okay, what should be done to help organizations better protect this data that is in question. And a significant factor in that, or what plays a significant role, is policy, right? So these organizations, they need to pay more attention to cybersecurity, what we call security controls, right? They need to have better security controls in place in order to be able to help protect people's data. And what that means is significant investment in technology, significant investment in people, significant investment in improvement in the processes around data protection. And there's a whole lot that comes with that, right? But it is investing heavily in that space. And in order to drive that, it has to be government that regulates and government that enforces policy that allows, that enables organizations to pay attention to compliance. Those are the key things that are going to drive the sector.
Still talking about the issue of protecting organizations, the NDPC indicated that there's been an increase in the number of data protection compliance organizations. It jumped by 60, from 103 to 163. Is this jump an indication that more organizations are paying attention to data breaches? And is it at the same time an indication that the NDPC is doing more than rejoice at the opportunity to increase its revenue?
Okay, so in terms of the number, I think that we should pick the right numbers to celebrate. An increase to 163, to be honest, is not something that is a big deal, in my opinion. With 60 organizations that help in relation to data protection compliance, right? Okay, that's fine, but that's 163 as opposed to how many organizations do we have? And so, in terms of what metrics do we show to show performance or delivery, I think that I think the right thing should be picked. So I don't think that is a significant enough number given the number of entities that we have in the country, right? And having these organizations in the first place, that's fine, right? But there's a whole lot more to do in terms of actually chasing these organizations to get compliance. And I think one of those key factors is education. I think that the commission needs to concentrate significantly on educating the organizations as opposed to just trying to throw the blanket, compliance, you have to comply. There needs to be way more activities that are geared towards educating, enlightening, and drawing these organizations to better understand why they even need to comply.
It's interesting that you talk about your thoughts on the number of companies, and you're not wrong. It is an abysmally low number when you talk about how many businesses are registered and use online services or data to carry out their operations. If at the moment the NDPC is seeing these number of breaches, even with a small pool of compliant companies, I wonder if you think they have the capacity to take on more.
So I do not believe that we are even scratching the surface when it comes to organizations that have been breached and, data that is exposed or data that's been compromised, individual data or organizational data that's been compromised. I do not believe that we're even scratching the surface, because in order for you to know that there's a breach, something would have happened, right? It's either, maybe significant amounts of data might have been, exposed in certain forums or online, or somebody is reporting that, there's an incident, right? There's a lot that we are not aware of. So certainly, do I think that we have the current capacities to be able to, properly detect incidences that happen and breaches? I do not think so. I definitely do not think that we have the right capacities yet. And there's also the factor of the private sector. The commission needs to work with the private sector significantly. And when I say private sector, I mean organizations that specialize in cybersecurity and data protection, beyond just defining that we have, certain organizations that help with compliance. Because it's a full ecosystem where you have organizations that specialize in security controls, and these security controls are required by organizations in order to protect data in the first place. So it's not just chasing them and saying, you're not in compliance or not. It's putting in place the enabling framework to enable organizations to actually comply.
Mr. Mosigo, Babcock University is one of the institutions that is mentioned by the NDPC as being investigated for data breaches. Now, I know that this is not the first time that they are facing this sort of situation. Between the year 2005 and 2007, they had a data breach that saw the school fees of some students lost due to hackers. Now, I'm asking this question because you talked about education for companies to be more aware of cybersecurity threats. Is there a need to sort of domicile cybersecurity as a course of study amongst educational institutions? Would that help with making companies more aware of what's going on and how to protect themselves?
Yeah, so absolutely. So of course, that would help. So the developing our capacities at the institutional level, where we have specialized courses in cybersecurity, is definitely a positive, and that would help. In the bigger picture, it's not going to have an immediate impact, certainly, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. We need to better appreciate cybersecurity professionals, and as such, it's better that we have institutions that train them. The good thing with cybersecurity is the education around cybersecurity it doesn't necessarily have to be institutionalized. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, a bachelor's degree course, a master's course, the PhD. That helps, right? But the field is so wide, and there are specialized courses that can actually be executed in such a way that it is not under, the core financial and the core educational institutions. And I think the Ministry of, Infotech is kind of like embracing that with the, 3MTT program, the training program that they're doing. I know that cybersecurity is one of the core focus areas also. So that is definitely a welcome development.
Well, Mr. Mosigo, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning on this conversation.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
Our guest this morning is Ozo Omosigo. He is with 0 and 1 as the technical lead. And we're talking about the NDPC's announcement that some 17 major cases of data breaches are being investigated across various sectors, including the finance, technology, education, consulting, government, logistics, as well as the gaming and lottery sectors.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM.